Hello and welcome to this video on compare contrast because that's what we get to do. Yay! All right, so let's take a look at this picture here. When we compare, we are looking at how things are alike. So when we look here, we have two young girls. They're both eating watermelon. They both have dark hair and stuff like that, similar hairstyles and whatever. So that's how things are alike. Now, contrast is how things would be different. So if we look at the same picture, one has their eyes open, one has their eyes closed, or at least they're looking down. If you look at their dresses, they're a little different as far as their colors goes. One's body, one's got more not quite got going on. So compare contrast. So again, compare is how things are alike, whereas contrast are more like how are things different. Again, apples and oranges are both fruits, but they are different. We could look at how that would be. So what is the whole point of compare contrast? Well, we have to make decisions in life, and we want to make good decisions. Well, compare contrast can help us make those choices. By looking at different things and different aspects, it can help us make informed decisions, which will lead us to make better decisions than not so good decisions. Well, what does compare contrast work well for? One of the most common ones that we use it for is to figure out that one thing is better than another. If we have to pick between two cars or two phones or two boyfriends or two girlfriends, whatever, okay? Sometimes we need to figure out which is better than the other, and we can use compare contrast. We can also use compare contrast to show that things that seem different are actually more alike. They'll seem like two different things, but actually when you look at them closer, they're more alike than not. Oh, okay, and vice versa. Sometimes people say, hey, those are exactly the same. When you say, well, actually, really not. They're actually a lot more different when you look at them closer, and compare contrast can help us with that. It does not really work well for the following, explaining the process. So if I have to change the tire on my Honda, and if I pull out the directions and it says, let's compare contrast how easy it is to change a tire for our Honda compared to a Lexus. I'm like, I don't care if it's easy or not. I need to know how to do it. So sometimes that's the idea of a process. Also, it's not the main drive for writing a fictional novel. Now, you may have compare contrast happen in a fictional novel, but you wouldn't necessarily write a fictional novel based on the concept of compare contrast. So here's an example of compare contrast. Let's say you go in and they have the iPhone 5, the iPhone 6. Yeah, that sounds a little dated, but it is what it is. And you're figuring, okay, which one do I want to get? Well, you have to figure out, well, what's the difference? What do they have in common? What's different? Maybe screen size, storage, price, battery life, all those kind of things. So this is what we're talking about. When things that are pretty similar, but still there's going to be some differences, and you want to figure that out. Or you could even look at, okay, let's say you could choose between an Android phone and a iPhone. Okay, well, oh my gosh, now we're talking about two different brands. What does this brand have that this one doesn't, and vice versa? What are the things you're looking for? We can look at the bigger screen, whatever. Okay, so this is kind of another way you can look at compare contrast when you're trying to figure out what picking between two different things. So keep in mind that compare contrast can be used as either a key strategy in your argument or can be used to support your point. So you can write a compare contrast paper or an essay where you're trying to figure out one thing is better than another or show that something is more different than it is alike and vice versa. Or you can use it to support your point. So let's say you're writing an argument paper where you're saying that marijuana should be legalized. You could use compare contrast of how states that have had it legalized versus those who haven't had it legalized. You can use that as supporting evidence, but it wouldn't be the main drive. Okay. Now, when you use compare contrast, make sure your subjects are somewhat alike. Okay, and that's important. For example, let's say you're trying to figure out who is the best football player in college. Okay. Well, you look at number 6 here. Oh, he looks pretty good. Okay, and I say he's the best. Well, why is he the best? Well, because compared to my 4-year-old niece, he's a lot stronger and faster. Well, guess what? Your 4-year-old niece isn't playing college football, so that doesn't prove anything. Really, for us to be able to show that he's the best, we'd have to compare him to other college football players. See that? Okay. So when using compare contrast, you need to make sure you stay focused on your purpose. Often people will start writing and then they get a little sidetracked for whatever reason. So let's say you're trying to pick two different phones and you're saying I have to pick between the iPhone and the Android, and then you start writing and all of a sudden you're telling a story about how your mom wouldn't let you have a phone because whatever. Okay, well, who cares? Not really who cares, but that's not really the focus of your paper. The focus of your paper needs to be which is the better phone and why, not why you didn't get a phone when you were a little kid or whatever, okay? Something else to keep in mind, we need a strong thesis statement to really help us drive the compare contrast paper. Now, a strong thesis statement, thesis is basically just a big fancy word for the main point. What is your main point? And what are you trying to get across? What is exactly your goal? And for compare contrast paper, there is a certain way that does it. So for a strong compare contrast thing, you need to include the subjects that are being compared and contrasted. Okay, what are we comparing? What are we contrasting? Make sure that's included in the thesis statement. Okay, indicate whether the essay focuses on the subject similarities, differences, or both, and also state the contrast, the main points of comparison and contrast. Okay, so let's give you an example here. Okay, the Samsung S5 is a better phone than the iPhone 6 based on battery life, processor speed, and size of video display. So please notice, we have the items being compared. Samsung, iPhone, okay? Okay, which position is being taken? This one is better. Okay. And how are we going to compare them? Battery life, processor speed, and size of video display. So that is an example of how that would be a thing. So what's wrong with this one? I am better than you. Okay, well, it's got the two things you're comparing, and it's making a stance, but it's not saying why. Okay, the Honda Accord has great gas mileage, excellent safety rating, and it retains its value over time. Fantastic. What is it missing? Maybe pause the video. What is it missing? It's not comparing two things. It's just talking about one of them. All right. So when using compare contrast, make sure the best points are discussed. If you're comparing two cars, maybe using the color of the volume knob on the stereo isn't the best way to figure out if that's the best car for you. There's other things that are more important. Just saying. And also make sure you organize the information in a proper way. That is going to be make it so it's more sensible. For example, a way to organize is you can do everything about one thing and then the other, or you can alternate. So this would be an example. Let's say you're going to compare apples and oranges. You talk all about the oranges and then the apples, where here you would alternate point by point. And for example, again, if we look at apples and oranges, okay, the point by point is, let's say we want to look at the different colors. Well, we'll talk about what the apple comes in and what the orange color. Okay, and then we go to what do people eat the skin, apples, oranges. So we're talking about the concepts, okay, that we're comparing. Different colors, do people eat the skin? Is it naturally broken up in sections? This would be the point by point, or they're all alternating ones, as opposed to apples, I'm talking nothing about apples and then oranges. So we're talking about the point, and then we're comparing the two things. Point and comparing those two things. So, yeah. And last but not least, when you are doing transitions between the two things, here are some helpful words. By way of contrast, on the other hand, however, but. So the iPhone 5 has a battery of 14 hours. By way of contrast, the iPhone 6 has a battery of 18 hours. So those are ways you can transition. So here's some main concepts of compare contrast. I know I kind of zipped through this, but it is a thing. So there's your video on compare contrast, and hopefully that'll help you understand the concepts. All right.